Good morning, everyone. It's very early in the morning, at least for me, but it's a pleasure to be here, to be the first speaker on this Tesena conference here in Vienna. I'm going to tell you something about DevSecOps, and for those of you who are already a little bit familiar with it, they will recognize that I use this arrow going to the left. So this is already the first hint. DevSecOps is all about shifting security to the left in your software supply chain or in your agile delivery pipeline, however you want to call it. To give you some background, I'm usually doing more hands-on stuff. I'm doing usually workshops where I really go there with people, take a code repo, and create with open source tools a DevOps pipeline and then shift it to a DevSecOps pipeline. Today we just have 35 minutes and I think I will get 5 minutes in addition. You stole them from me somehow. Okay, so I will try to be very fast. First of all, a few sentences to me. I'm founder and CEO of Botium. For those of you who are in testing and haven't heard about Botium, oh my God. So Botium is the industry standard for testing artificial intelligence and conversational AI, and all of you that are testers or are tech guys will come through this in the next years. It's the big thing in information technology. Company is there since 2 years. We have gained in the meanwhile 50,000 open source users, so we can call ourselves the industry standard. Yeah, pretty cool stuff. I'm not only saying this to do some marketing for me, of course a little bit I am, but the important point I want to make is I'm not a security champion or expert, neither a DevOps engineer. What I am is more or less a full stack IT guy, and for me it's possible to create a DevSecOps pipeline. So that's no rocket science, and you will see this here. Yes, I'm organizer of some meetups, the WhatsApp Vienna, keynote speaker. Most important thing on this slide, famous drummer in Vienna. And by accident today in the evening I'm playing in the so-called Gültenbögen, so if you spend your night in Vienna and you want to see some cool rock, go there. If you have questions, and I'm open for everything, no matter what, also if you want to know where we will play the next time with the band, search for my name, you will find tons of infos on Google, on all developer platforms and so on. So, I really have to rush. Before we start to talk about DevSecOps, I want to leave one word about DevOps, because this thing really changed everything in 2006 when the CTO of Amazon, Werner Vogels, said in an interview this famous sentence, you build it, you run it. It's just a sentence, but behind it there is this big mindset about bringing agile development into your organizations and development teams. And if you are not familiar with DevOps, then I came yesterday again across this book. This is the Bible of DevOps. If you want to start with it, read this book. I'm not getting money from these guys, but read it. And at the end of this book, there is a table with some interesting numbers. It tells us there Amazon is deploying 23,000 times per day. 23,000 times. And this number is, the book is from 2014. So in the meanwhile, I met some Amazon guys in India at the conference in the summer. They are deploying every second more than 1 up to 2 times. So at the end of the day, it's more than 100,000 deployments per day. Of course, not all into production, a lot of them in some staging, in pre-production environments, but it's more than 100,000 deployments. And this is an enormous number, and it's even getting more interesting when you talk to their testers. With these more than 100,000 deployments every day, they're running round about 140 million unit tests every day. Yeah? Enormous numbers. So some of you might think, how the fuck is this frequency rate or deployment rate possible? And the answer is, they have almost perfect DevSecOps pipelines in place, and this is why we have to talk about this topic. So to give you a quick definition, a scientific one, if you dive into this topic, you will come across this guy. Stefan Streichsbier defines DevSecOps as enabling organizations to deliver inherently secure software at DevOps speed. Sounds a little bit complicated. I'm trying to rephrase this always, making it easier for people. DevSecOps is just DevOps. done right. Because if I join a company and they're showing me their DevOps pipeline and they're proud out of it, and you can't find any security testing inside it, then it's not really a DevOps pipeline. Because you can't ship to production without security having in place. And I think you have to click now here to give you some interactive explanation of what is DevSecOps. I have a short video for you.
What is DevSecOps? In today's application development landscape, cyber attacks have become more frequent and sophisticated. Security architects are looking for new ways to ensure their products are safe and working properly for customers. DevSecOps solves this problem by placing security earlier in the lifecycle of application development to reduce vulnerabilities and bring security closer to IT and business objectives. DevSecOps brings operations and development together so that everyone and every part of the software development lifecycle is responsible for security. One of the ways this works is by automating as much as possible, including building, packaging, testing, and deployment. This ensures core security tasks are not thought of as an add-on, helping security architects to move from manual configuration to more strategic policy-building activities. Doing so ensures software is tested at every phase of its development from beginning to end, with security measures in place and in mind. This integrative process is known as shifting left, where software security requirements enter the development cycle. The benefits of a DevSecOps approach are simple. More automation and security from the start reduces the risk of human errors like misadministration and mistakes. That, in turn, reduces the chances of incidents like botched installs or configurations. It also ensures software functions are running at their best. Customers have a better chance of getting updates that fix security issues much faster, which helps them better safeguard from imminent threats in real time. In the end, DevSecOps has enormous potential to improve application security and customer security.
So, to recap, what is DevSecOps? DevSecOps is about ensuring that your product meets every kind of security standard. It's about shifting left by integrating security controls in the early stage of development. I got the question a few weeks ago at the talk, why is this called shifting left? I was surprised, but maybe the question is also here, it's in some head. Yeah? If you think about a typically graphical representation of your software supply chain or delivery pipeline, you start on the left with planning things, with building things, with putting them in some artifact repository, deploying, releasing, and so on. Yeah? So going from the left to the right. And in these old days, 15 years ago, when we didn't have these DevOps and DevSecOps approaches, security testing was the last thing just before you went into production. Now it's about shifting this stuff to the left, starting from the beginning and putting in every stage of your chain. It's about fostering closer collaboration between teams for security, meaning that, of course, if you shift this left, also your security guys are incorporated already on the first stages. And it's about automating security with the latest tools and concepts at every level. And I don't have a slide for this one, but it's an important fact. It's about being competitive. Yeah? For example, if you take Amazon, they are able, with their major DevSecOps pipeline, to deploy more than 100,000 times per day. One of their biggest competitors, which is Alibaba, is only able to do it 10,000 times per day because their pipeline, they don't have this process there. And this is a big problem. They are not that competitive. And by the way, we are coming there into some kind of paradoxon of information technology. You should move faster, you should innovate all the time, but doing it always secure. So years ago, this was a paradoxon. Nowadays, with DevSecOps, it's not anymore. A few words to the transition. So how do you go from DevOps to DevSecOps? So it's about adding three things: adding the right technologies, adding the right people, and adding the right processes. Or to be more specific, in technology, it's about adding the right security automation tools, and this is what I will focus on in the next few slides. It's about adding the right people. Of course, you need some security experts, and it's about adding secure development processes. So you have for example, to train your developers, your engineers, your testers. So a developer has to look at this code from a perspective of an attacker. Then he writes different code. This changes how you work. So finally, the battery is out. Coming to security testing, this is now the part that I usually do in workshops with people, where again we usually start with a Git repo, having some code inside, where we really build with open source tools in one afternoon a DevOps pipeline, and then do the transition to DevSecOps. And I identified more or less these 7 kind of methodologies and technologies that are important when you want to go to DevSecOps. Of course, we can discuss, for example, there, the experts of you will immediately say functional security testing is missing. This is something that already has to be there in your DevOps pipeline. Yeah? So I assume if you have a DevOps pipeline, you already, let's assume you are building a mobile app, you have the functional testing with Appium or whatever, and if you have a login, I assume that you already have a functional test for it, by doing a standard case, a misuse case, a negative case by providing a wrong password or something. So this is why I'm not mentioning here. And what is also missing is compliance testing. Of course, in big organizations here in Europe, you have to test for GDPR and so on, but this thing can't be automated. Yeah? This is the reason why I haven't put it here. I have seen a lot of people taking pictures. I guess you will get the slides afterwards. So you don't need to, or you can take pictures of me. Maybe this is, but this would be unusual, to be honest. It's okay, I'm fine. So, going into some details. First thing you do is you start with threat modeling. This is what I mentioned before. You have to train your developers and develop this mindset of looking at code and software from an attacker's perspective. Problem is this thing can't be automated. So when we are doing these workshops and creating a DevSecOps pipeline, this we can't include there, and I've put here on the right corner, you can't automate it. But the next one is already a very big thing, because it's so easy to implement and integrate, and it brings you so much forward. That's about static application security testing, which is more or less checking and scanning your code all the time and providing instant feedback to developers on security-related issues. Easy example, you are developing code in your IDE. For nearly every IDE out there, there are plugins to do this SAST, as we call it. Yeah? You write code, you save it, immediately you get a pop-up, hey, that's not secure. Yeah? Easy example, there are still developers putting passwords, private keys, or whatever into code. Yeah? So these tools would automatically pop up and prevent you from doing this. And the cool thing is, for this SAST and also for most of the other stuff, there's great open source software out there. I'm just mentioning here a few, and the most famous one is for sure SonarQube. By the way, I'm always just mentioning here open source software, because also all the products I develop are open source, and they are great and they bring you forward. In this list you can extend here, there are more than 100 tools for SAST, because there are so many different programming languages. So there is not one tool that supports everything. SonarQube covers already a lot. Yeah, and this is already the point where I want to show you how this would look in a real product. So we are building Botium with CodeShip, for example, and if we go here into a failed build, and I look what happened, then I'm pretty sure that we will see, yeah, it was ESLint firing here, and if I come to the problems, I don't know if it's too small for you, but it's all about code quality and security. We have here, we must use single quotes instead of double quotes, and the other stuff is here using too much spaces. This is about code formatting and checking. Usually the SaaS tools also do this. Yeah, but usually if we see a failing build here in our pipeline, then it was SaaS that fired, because none of our developers would check in code to the pipeline that doesn't compile on his or her local machine. So, and of course, before we go to dynamic application security testing, developers do this SaaS on the local machine, and then we do it again in the pipeline, yeah? Because it takes no time. You build, it takes 0.3 milliseconds to do this check. So you do it always through all stages. Coming to dynamic applications, security testing, here we are entering the next level. While the static one was just checking code, meaning pure white box testing. This one is being about searching for vulnerabilities while the application is already running, and therefore it's a major improvement, and it's really about trying to attack your application. Also here there are very good tools. Most famous one is the Z-attack proxy from OWASP. And this, I don't know if you know these OWASP, but those are, or this is the driving community behind security standards out there. And the cool thing is they are delivering this Z-attack proxy as a Docker container, and they are updating it every 2 weeks. And what you can do is you can just let this container attack your product. Yeah? They will try out latest vulnerabilities, attacks, and so on. And you don't need the skills. Inside this container, you find SQL injections and whatever, cross-site scripting and so on. You don't have to be a security expert. You just need to be able to integrate the execution of a Docker container in your pipeline. This is what I meant at the beginning when I said, I'm not the security champion and I'm not the DevOps champion, but I'm able to run a Docker container in my pipeline. This brings you already forward, and also there I can show you a short live demo how this works. So, going into my console. Hopefully this is big enough for you. I tried it out before, of course, because I prepared, say, I can already show you the outcome. So what we did here, we just passed into this Docker container an endpoint, and an endpoint in this case is a website, but it could be your microservice, it could be an API, or you could even let it go and scroll or crawl across the whole product. And as you can see, a lot of tests are going on there, yeah? And they were all passed. And again, this thing is updated every 2 weeks by these guys. You don't have to do anything by yourself. You just put it in your pipeline. You build 100,000 times per day at Amazon, and all the time these things are running and checking your application, which is pretty cool. Yeah, of course it was executed again, and all was fine. So, coming back. Yeah, this is, by the way, I took this out of the logs of this set container running in our pipeline, and just to conclude here, they're checking for missing incorrect headers, cookie problems, injections, cross-site scripting, information error disclosure. This happens a lot still, weak authentication methods, CSF tokens, and so on. So this is really something you should go for. Yeah, coming to runtime, application self-protection. This is again the next step, and here we are most of the time already in production. Yeah? It is there to detect real-time attacks, and if an attack is known here, or if the application sees a behavior that was not expected, it takes control over your application. And this is an easy example would be mobile apps. You have a mobile app, and usually Rasping is there to detect if your phone is jailbroken or not. Yeah? If it is jailbroken, a lot of applications will tell you, we don't support this. Yeah? Or if I take, where is my phone? I lost it. If I take my mobile banking app number 26 and connect it here to the Beamer, you won't see anything. It blocks to share your screen on a bigger one and so on, because it's confidential data, and this is what runtime application self-protection is about. Then we have mobile application security testing, which is a combination of dynamic and static scanning, including also manual penetration testing. Here, at least in the mobile sector, we're also covering functional and non-functional security testing. And the next one is then interactive application security testing, which is also pretty cool because it combines Rasping and dynamic application security testing. And there, more or less, the dynamic security testing behaves as an attacker, yeah, creating attacks. And on the other side, the Rasping is more or less monitoring the behavior of application while you are getting attacked, because it has these insights in the whole application flow, logic, configuration, and so on. And this is pretty cool to also find possible vulnerabilities. And the last one, and this is one that took us a lot, is about software composition analysis. So when, I don't know, 16 months ago, the first company that bought our product was from America, having more than 400,000 employees. Yeah? So a very big company, and it's not like they are not going to your online store and click on buy. So they connect you with their procurement, and then you do these things with these bastards, and then they connect you to their legal. Yeah? And then things are getting tricky because they are asking what kind of third-party libraries and open source software do you integrate in your product? And there is nothing out there that doesn't use third-party libraries. Yeah? And the problem is you're including one, and this third-party library includes another, includes another, includes another, includes another, includes another. Yeah? And what software composition analysis does, it creates a report of all your third-party components that you are using, and it identifies at the same time, are there open vulnerabilities to these libraries, and are there newer versions where you could update to? You know? In our case, this legal department was complaining because we were using Java 8 or something in those days, and they said there is an open vulnerability for Java. You know? And we were like, okay, and how many other applications do you use in a company that are using Java 8? Hundreds. Yeah? So there is not always a solution for this one. Of course, they wanted to lower the price. This was the reason behind it. But again, if you're selling software, every company would ask you for this report. And also to do this, there's great open source software out there. Again, OWASP is providing here with that check, dependency check, a really cool tool. So, and then, rushing, I did it really good. I'm already coming to the last few slides. It's about integrating these security methodologies and technologies into your infinite DevOps loop as we know it. Of course, some things we could discuss here. Yeah? Rasping, we would also test in an earlier stage, not only when you are in production and so on, but it happens there all the time. This is why I put it here. But things we can't discuss is threat modeling, of course, happens in your planning phase, yeah? When your developers are looking on the architecture and so on. The static code analysis, of course, happens when you are building your code, when you're checking it out. Also, the software composition analysis and so on. So this is where we locate this thing, and I think it's now the last slide. Yes, it's the last slide. So if you would like to join once this workshop that I'm doing, to create a DevOps and afterwards a DevSecOps pipeline, this is exactly the outcome. So for those of you who are familiar with Jenkins, then you know this graphical representation. This is what we do usually in the first 2 hours. What you see on top, we take a Git repo having a Hello World application in it, and we create a DevOps pipeline where we check out code, where we build it, where we do some unit tests, where we deploy to a trunk, to a dev environment in this case. We're doing some system tests, we deploy to a user acceptance test environment, do the acceptance test there, and then deploy to production. And this takes us 2 hours or something to set this up, and then we have a running DevOps pipeline. And then the real challenge of this workshop is to go to this kind of DevSecOps, where we include, after checking out code, static security testing, where we integrate SCA, where we integrate mobile application security testing, if it is a mobile app, where we integrate dynamic application security testing, rasping, and finally interactive application security testing. And again, this can be done in one afternoon. And then when you look, it's a real example here, when you look at the execution times, how long this security testing takes, it's more or less nothing. Yeah? It's milliseconds. So there is no reason to not do it. So do it to stay competitive. That's it. Thank you for your attention.
So we'll switch to Slido. Are there any questions?
If you don't have one, I have one. So usually when I go to conference, I'm taking a selfie of me with the audience in the background and send it to my employees, because otherwise they always think I'm on party or something and not working. So if you are fine with it, I take a selfie. If, and this is important for security reasons, you don't want to be in this picture, turn around, look somewhere else, whatever, yeah? I'm taking a selfie now. And if you liked what you saw, maybe you can... Okay, cool. Thank you, that was great.
Okay. Slido, no Slido, Slido. You have the questions, Patrick? No? Any questions? Okay, so while you get used to Slido, then we'll ask questions. If anybody wants to ask a question, if you just raise your hand. I have a question. You mentioned the presentation was about tools, and then you have there the second important thing is the people. Where do you find people who know about security? What's the best place to look?
To be honest, in Austria, it's pretty difficult to find a security champion. So what big companies are aiming for, they're training their in-house guys in security. This is one possibility. But for example, in my company, I'm trying now to hire someone from India, which is in Austria not so easy. Yeah? It takes you 6 months from a legal perspective. These experts, you can't find them on every corner, to be honest. But the cool thing is, as I mentioned before, I think I'm saying it now for the 5th time, I'm not that security champion, yeah? But I can integrate this OWASP SAP container. In the inside, those vulnerability checks and attacks that are there, they have been done by these champions at OWASP. Yeah? So do this, there you already cover 80% or whatever, yeah, of the attacks up there.
Okay, any question from the audience? Because I have another one.
Oh, really, Dennis? Oh my God.
To use Dust, do you need to create test, or you just have the Docker and then it starts attacking the running application?
In this case, I just take it, yeah.
So it comes with some basic attacking methodology.
Exactly. There is, I mean, would be now going into too much detail, but there's an active and passive scan inside. Yeah. Then we have to start discussing if we do this active scan, don't do it on your production application because it kills the application, of course. It's about finding boundaries, where does it break and so on. Yeah, and of course you can completely, it's a Docker container. You will have the source code, you can completely change it, it's open source. So,
another question? Because I have another one.
Thank you for your talk. So it's about basically inserting the security all through your DevOps process. I probably know the answer on my question already, but
this is one of the best questions.
Yeah, maybe it is, because maybe you're surprising me anyway. But I see a lot of teams struggling with doing the DevOps in a proper way. So should you have that installed or conquered first before you can?
Yes. There is no DevSecOps without DevOps. I don't want to show you my back, but for these guys who have problems there, start with this book. By the way, there's a new version called the Unicorn Project. If this is the next one to read, yeah, this should be next to your bed.
Getting behind the reading.
Yeah, of course, you need to have a DevOps pipeline. This is also why I showed you on the last slide, we start in these workshops by creating a DevOps pipeline. You need to be able to build fast and cheap and bring value to your customers out there. Yeah. But you can't do it without integrating security. This goes hand in hand.
Any more questions? I have one. It's hard to get teams to do DevOps properly, and then somebody comes along and says, hey, we should do DevSecOps. How do you get people to buy into it? What's a good tactic? Use fear or anger?
I'm saying something mean or rude now. So if you have people in your company that are questioning this concept of DevOps, DevSecOps, that is there since 15 years, and when you're showing them these numbers where your competitors are and going hundreds of times to production a week, and they are questioning this concept and want to stay, I don't know, at waterfall or something, then you should get rid of these people. Sorry. Those are not engineers. IT and engineering is about adopting all the time. And my personal life in working in information technology has completely changed. 10 years ago, testing was something different.
Okay, so let's take one question from Slido. So can people see how it works? So the first one, why is test a separate phase in your DevOps infinity loop? Shouldn't testing be integrated everywhere?
Yes, this is just a copy out of the DevOps infinite loop, but I agree with this one. Yeah.
Okay. And the next one, why not Kali? I have no idea what that means.
Yeah, my personal experience with Kali is it's forbidden to some perspective, at least here in Europe. If we're talking about the same thing, I was using Kali Linux for some time. From a legal perspective, it's not unknown. I don't know who had the question, but we can discuss it maybe after. Maybe we can discuss this outside, because Kali is, you're leaving somehow the legal track, I think.
Okay, so thank you very much. The conversation continues in the breaks. Christoph is here. We'll be delighted to discuss any of your questions or discuss anything that you want. So I would like to, if you could give Christoph another round of applause, please. Thank you.